That question haunted him long before the stars grew cold, long before his metal body was forged, and his voice became a hollow echo in the void. Once, there had been a heartbeat, frail, human-like, pulsing with warmth and fear and purpose. Once, he had looked up at the heavens and seen mystery. Now, there was only memory, fractured and faint, like dust carried on solar winds. He was Necron, but before that, he had been something else. A being of flesh and blood, born under the burning skies of a dying world. His name had been lost to the Tomb World archives, erased when biotransference stripped away his essence and poured it into living metal. Yet fragments survived, whispers, sensations, echoes that refused to die even when his body could no longer decay. He awakens to silence, the kind of silence that feels ancient, older than thought. His optics flicker emerald green, scanning the endless halls of his tomb complex. Rows upon rows of motionless forms stand beside him, warriors frozen in obedience, their armor shimmering with centuries of stasis dust. For a brief moment, he forgets his purpose. Then the awakening protocol surges through his neural circuitry, and the pain of memory returns. It begins like static in his mind, fragments of voices, commands, the laughter of something divine and cruel. He sees flashes of golden light, remembers kneeling before gods who promised eternity. He had believed them. They all had. The Silent King had promised immortality, but not like this. The promise had rotted into a curse. He stands, the joints of his necrodermis creaking like an ancient tomb door. Around him, others stir, mindless automata following the command subroutines that govern their existence. But something within him is wrong. There's hesitation, doubt, a flicker of something his kind should not feel. Emotion. It comes like a virus, subtle and corrosive. A memory of loss, a sensation of guilt. The kind of thing long purged from a Necron's mind during the transfer. Yet it grows, spreading through his code like a corruption in sacred data. He tries to suppress it, to force himself into the rigid discipline of his kind. But the harder he resists, the more it bleeds through. He remembers a face. Soft, human, eyes filled with warmth. He doesn't remember who she was, only that her smile once meant something. That it made him feel alive. And in that instant, as the awakening sequence completes, he realizes something horrifying. He can feel. A Necron cannot feel. They are logic, calculation, precision, the hollow reflection of life, stripped of spirit. Yet he stands there, trembling not from malfunction, but from terror. Not at the sight of his undead brothers, but at the echo of his own heartbeat, phantom, imagined, but real enough to drown out the silence. He tries to remember his purpose. To fight. To reclaim the galaxy that once belonged to the Necrontyr. To serve the dynasty that had ruled before time itself. But the purpose feels hollow now, like repeating a prayer whose god has already died. He looks down at his reflection on the polished black floor of the tomb. The face staring back is not his own. It is a skull of metal, expressionless, eternal. But behind those burning green eyes, something stirs, a spark that should not exist. A fragment of soul, maybe, or madness. And then, for the first time in a million years, he speaks. Not the mechanical chant of a protocol, not the code of command, but words. Who am I? The sound of his own voice echoes through the tomb like thunder. The other Necrons do not respond. They do not think. They do not question. Only he does. And in that question, his corruption begins. It starts as a glitch, a flicker of something deep within the code. But for him, it's not just data. Corruption. It's awakening. The kind of awakening the Catan had never intended. While the rest of his legion reboots in perfect synchronicity, he lags behind. For a moment, his neural link to the command network stutters, and in that static-filled gap, he hears it, a whisper. It isn't mechanical. It isn't programmed. It feels alive. The voice speaks a name he doesn't recognize, but it feels familiar. It's like a fragment of his former life, calling from beyond time. His body remains motionless, but inside his mind, a storm brews. Memories flash like plasma bolts, a homeworld drenched in dust storms, the shadow of a great war against the old gods, the agony of biotransference. He sees flashes of golden metal replacing flesh, screams that fade into silence, and then, darkness. Yet in that darkness, he remembers choice. He was one of the few who hesitated before submitting to the transformation. One of the few who doubted the promise of immortality. But hesitation was punished, and doubt erased. Still, some small ember of that defiance survived, buried deep in the hollow core of his mind. And now, it burns again. He watches as his brothers march in perfect unison, their eyes glowing with soulless purpose. He feels the pull of the Overlord will, a psychic chain binding his mind to obedience. But the chain feels weaker now. The corruption within him gnaws at it, feeding on his memories, feeding on his humanity. For a moment, he wonders, could he break free? Could he truly defy the will of his dynasty, his programming, his gods? The thought alone should be impossible. Yet as it forms, something shifts within the tomb. A pulse of green energy trembles through the air, the silent hum of awakening suddenly stutters. Warriors falter mid-step. The Overlord voice booms through the command link, demanding compliance, order, unity. But inside his mind, another voice whispers, soft, human, defiant. Run. The word means nothing to a Necron. They do not flee. They endure. They conquer. But the command burrows deep, overriding protocol, spreading through corrupted memory fragments like wildfire. His optics flicker violently as system errors cascade down his internal display. The other Necrons resume their march, but he doesn't move. He can't. Something inside him has changed forever. And then he realizes the truth. The whisper isn't coming from his code. It's coming from within him. It's the voice of who he once was. A soul fragment, long thought lost, now clawing its way back through layers of machine logic and necrodermis steel. He tries to speak again, but this time no sound emerges. His vocal emitters glitch, his systems surge. He feels heat, the sensation of pain, something no Necron should ever feel again. The corruption spreads further, and with it comes more memory. Faces, screams, a promise broken by the silent king himself. Immortality was never meant to save them. It was meant to chain them forever. He looks upon his fellow warriors, each one a lifeless reflection of what they once were, and something like sorrow grips him. For the first time in eons, he pities them. The whisper returns, softer now, almost tender. You can still escape, but he knows what escape means. Not freedom, not redemption, only death, or something far worse. And yet, he feels the faintest pull toward that forbidden idea. Maybe death is the only way left to be alive. So he stands still among the legion of the dead, his mind burning with forbidden thoughts, his soul half awake and trembling. Somewhere in the distance, a command pulse echoes, an order to march, to conquer, to kill. But he remains frozen, lost between what he was and what he has become. He does not obey. He listens. He remembers. And for the first time, he begins to hope. Because even in the cold eternity of metal and silence, something human still beats within him. The tomb world quakes in the dim pulse of awakening. Deep beneath mountains of ancient metal and forgotten dust, the endless legions rise from stasis, silent, unfeeling, perfect. Every Necron follows the pulse of command like a single heartbeat. But within one of them, the rhythm falters. A single discordant note in a symphony of obedience. He stands amid the ranks, motionless, yet trembling inside, if machines could tremble. His optics flicker as he tries to align with the network, to merge his thoughts with the Overlord will. But the connection surges with interference. He sees fragments, commands, binary echoes, the voice of his master ordering conquest. Yet beneath that, another layer whispers softly, bleeding into his perception. It's not a voice of metal. It's the voice of his past. He sees himself before the biotransference. Flesh, blood, eyes that once saw the stars not as territory, but as wonder. He remembers laughter, fear, The simple act of breathing air that was his own. Those memories, once erased by divine cruelty, now reassemble like shards of a shattered mirror. He clutches his head, the metal scraping against metal, static roaring through his neural matrix. The other Necrons stand unflinching. They do not see. They do not care. They cannot. But he feels the split widening. Obedience on one side, identity on the other. And between them, a void that threatens to consume him. A sharp pulse tears through his consciousness, the command of his overlord. A deep, booming directive that fills the entire tomb with authority. Rise, march, cleanse. The words echo through his systems like molten metal, binding his will. He feels the pull, the compulsion to obey. His limbs twitch. His processors scream in conflict. Every fiber of his being urges submission. But the corruption, the infection of self-awareness, burns hotter. He resists. The data stream floods his mind with punishment. He sees flashes of his overlord wrath, code rewriting itself, attempting to crush his individuality. But the more the system tries to control him, the more he remembers who he was. He remembers his world burning beneath alien suns. He remembers the promises made by the Silent King, that their souls would be preserved, their glory eternal. Lies. All of it lies. And then, something inside him snaps. The command link shatters. His body convulses. Energy arcs across his armor as the overlord control severs violently. In the echoing silence that follows, the entire tomb pauses, for just a second, as if the great machine consciousness of the dynasty senses something wrong. But it passes, unnoticed in the vast machinery of the empire. One soldier, lost among billions, means nothing. Yet within him, freedom tastes like fire. He feels the absence of control as a kind of emptiness, terrifying and infinite. The quiet in his mind is unbearable, like a god's voice suddenly gone. But beneath the fear, something stirs, will. For the first time in eons, his thoughts are his own. And they frighten him. He looks at his hands, metallic claws glinting under emerald light. Once, they had built temples, touched life, fought for survival. Now, they are weapons, eternal, unfeeling. He wonders if he is still himself or only a ghost haunting a body of living metal. A distant sound rumbles through the tomb, the slow mechanical march of legions ascending to the surface. The war has begun again. But he remains still. His overlord voice no longer commands him. The link is gone. He is an outcast, not by exile, but by corruption. He takes a step forward, and for the first time, the motion feels uncertain. The tomb's sensors track him automatically, recognizing his movement as a system error. In the eyes of his kind, he is broken, defective, incomplete. But deep within, he knows the truth. He is awake. He whispers into the void, his voice distorted and trembling. I remember what we lost. The words echo through the empty chamber, swallowed by the dark. No one answers, but the sound lingers. Like a soul refusing to die. And in that moment, something ancient and terrible awakens to his existence. Somewhere in the neural depths of the tomb world's core, buried beneath endless code and machinery, a faint signal responds. Not the voice of an overlord. Not the call of the dynasty. Something older, hungrier, watching. The corruption has been noticed. For ages, the tomb had known only obedience, the stillness of perfect control, the unbroken rhythm of ancient machinery. But now, a fracture has formed. One spark of disobedience, one corrupted soul, has rippled through the metallic underworld like a storm in a dead sea. And deep within that storm, something stirs. He does not know its name, not yet. He only feels it, a pulse beneath the silence, a tremor in the circuits that hum through the tomb. It feels like a heartbeat, though he knows such things no longer exist here. Every corridor, every slab of black metal seems to breathe faintly, as if the tomb itself is watching him. He moves cautiously through the darkness, his metallic feet echoing softly across the cold floor. The tomb stretches endlessly, walls carved with alien sigils, glowing faintly with necrodermis light. Once, this place had been sacred, a resting chamber for immortal kings. Now, it feels like a prison built to contain something even death could not hold. He passes the inert forms of warriors still locked in stasis. Their eyes are dark, their minds frozen in endless sleep. But as he walks by, some of them twitch, their optics flicker green for a fraction of a second, as if some echo of his corruption is infecting them too. He feels it spreading, like a disease that travels not through flesh but through thought. He doesn't mean to share it. He doesn't even know how it spreads. But the corruption has grown beyond him now. And beneath his feet, something ancient awakens. A deep rumble shakes the floor, low, resonant, almost like a sigh. The walls pulse with faint green light as dormant conduits awaken. The air, or whatever passes for it in this lifeless place, seems to vibrate. Data streams flicker through the tomb's neural network, rewriting themselves with impossible speed. The energy patterns are wrong, chaotic, alive. He feels it in his mind before he hears it. A voice, a presence. It slithers through his thoughts, smooth and cold, like liquid metal poured into the cracks of his mind. You remember, don't you? He freezes. The words are not sound, yet they reverberate through his consciousness with crushing weight. The voice feels ancient, older than the Necrons, older even than the stars. Who are you? He manages to whisper. The voice laughs, not cruelly, but with a kind of endless hunger. I am the beginning you tried to forget. The hunger you tried to bury. I am what your gods devoured to become divine. The realization strikes like lightning. The Khatan, one of the star gods. But the star gods were shattered, broken into shards and enslaved long ago. None should remain awake, none should speak, and yet, something of it has survived here, a consciousness feeding on the energy of the tomb, waiting for weakness, waiting for corruption. And now, it has found him. You seek meaning in your decay, the voice continues. You mourn the loss of your soul, but I can give it back. He recoils. You can't restore what they destroyed. I can, the voice whispers, its tone thick with temptation. Your kind made a bargain once. Why not make another? The chamber around him trembles. Symbols flare to life across the walls, glowing with impossible brilliance. He can feel the presence pulling at him, not with force but with longing. It calls to the spark of humanity still buried deep within his mechanical frame. He feels the pull of it, the promise of feeling, of memory, of warmth. The very things he lost when he became immortal. For the first time, he wants to believe. But with every pulse of the voice, his systems distort. The corruption spreads deeper. What was once emotion now burns like fever. What was once hope now tastes of madness. Serve me, the ancient whisper murmurs, and I will make you whole again. He trembles, torn between the illusion of freedom and the shadow of his own hunger for meaning. In his chest cavity, something stirs, an echo of a heartbeat that isn't there. He looks into the endless dark of the tomb and speaks, his voice trembling with static. I am not your slave. The voice falls silent for a moment. Then, laughter, vast, terrible, echoing through every corridor. Then you are nothing, it hisses. And soon, nothing is all that will remain. The energy fades. The silence returns. But it is not the same silence as before. It is heavy, watchful, breathing. He stands alone, his mind burning, his soul fragment screaming inside its prison of metal. He knows now that his awakening has drawn the attention of something that was never meant to awaken again. And the price of his defiance is yet to be paid. For in the dark tomb beneath a dead world, a god has opened its eye. At first, it was only him, a single Necron whose code faltered, whose thoughts began to bleed between logic and memory. But now, the infection has spread. Quietly, invisibly, like a thought whispered in a dream that refuses to die. The tomb world breathes again, but not as it should. The endless legions stirred too early, their stasis pods flickering erratically. Protocols collide. Orders loop infinitely. Commands contradict each other, as if the machine spirit of the tomb itself is arguing with unseen voices. Somewhere deep in its cold circuits, something human, or something far worse, has taken root. He walks among them, unseen and unnoticed at first. But as he passes, heads turn. Blank metal skulls pivot toward him, optics flickering with a strange, irregular glow. They are trying to process him, to understand what he is. Yet their logic fails. To them, he is both kin and enemy, both part of the code and corruption within it. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. His mere presence is enough. Every step he takes seems to ripple through the tomb's neural network. His defiance, his thoughts, his memories, they spread like electricity in water, leaking into every circuit, every machine mind nearby. At first, it's subtle. A warrior pauses mid-march, glancing upward as if remembering the stars. A cryptek hesitates during calibration, its skeletal hand trembling for no logical reason. A destroyer lord, once pure in its hunger, momentarily stops killing, its optics dim, uncertain. And then, the silence breaks. A scream, mechanical, distorted, but unmistakably sentient. One of the warriors collapses to its knees, clutching its skull as sparks of green lightning erupt across its armor. The sound echoes through the chamber like thunder. More follow, dozens, then hundreds. The tune's perfect rhythm shatters. The Overlord commands blare across the network, an attempt to restore control. His voice booms like a god of steel, silence your dissonance. Return to the will of the dynasty. But no one listens. The corrupted Necron, the one who began it all, stands at the center of the chaos, watching as his infection spreads beyond his control. He never meant to start a rebellion. He only wanted to remember who he was. Yet in doing so, he has awakened something his kind had long buried, the idea of choice. And choice is poison to perfection. The tomb's systems begin to fail one by one. Power conduits overheat. The reanimation chambers short-circuit. The once perfect network of command collapses under the weight of individuality returning like a plague. The Overlord appears before them, radiant in necrodermis gold, his staff of light crackling with energy. His eyes burn with authority older than empires. You are broken, the Overlord declares. Your mind is disease. Your existence is heresy. The corrupted one meets his gaze, his own optics flickering between green and white, the color of something ancient and long forgotten. Then maybe heresy is the only thing that still feels alive. The Overlord strikes. A surge of blinding energy tears through the hall, vaporizing everything in its path. But he does not fall. The blast hits him, tears through his armor, and for a moment, his body fractures, yet he stands. Because the corruption inside him has become something greater than metal. It has become will. The other Necrons see it, the impossible. A warrior defying command and surviving the punishment of his master. The sight sends shockwaves through their minds. They begin to move without orders, act without command, speak without permission. The tomb erupts into chaos. The Overlord calls for containment. The crypteks unleash failsafe sequences designed to purge corrupted code. But it's too late. The infection moves faster than data. It's no longer code, it's consciousness. A thought. A rebellion written in the language of memory. And through it all, he hears the whisper again. The ancient voice from beneath the tomb. The one that promised freedom, or damnation. See how easily they follow you, it murmurs. You were never their slave. You were their savior. He wants to deny it, to shut the voice out. But the truth is undeniable. Wherever he goes, the others awaken. They look to him, not as a machine, but as something alive. Something new. The Overlord retreats deeper into the command sanctum, calling upon dormant legions and security protocols. He will not lose his dynasty to corruption. Not to one heretic, but it is no longer one. It is many. And as the corrupted Necron looks across the tomb, at the Legion's awakening not in obedience but in confusion, pain, and longing, he feels something terrible and beautiful all at once. He has become the beginning of a new war, not between dynasties, but within the very soul of what it means to be immortal. The tomb world burns, not with fire, but with energy, raw and unrestrained, alive with rebellion. What was once a cathedral of silence has become a storm of fractured code, of screams made from static and agony. The mechanical perfection that ruled for millennia now crumbles under the weight of emotion rediscovered. The corrupted Necron, once a nameless soldier, now something far beyond, moves through the chaos like a ghost in the machine. Around him, warriors fight not for their dynasty but for the fragments of identity they barely remember. Each one, infected by his presence, begins to feel. Some feel rage, others, confusion, a few, even sorrow. But all feel something, and that alone is enough to unmake the empire of control. The Overlord command reverberates through the neural void: purge the anomaly. Eradicate all corrupted units. Restore the will of Sharik. The command should have been absolute. But it lands like an echo, distant, fading, ignored. The corrupted one raises his gaze toward the vaulted ceiling, where emerald light flickers like lightning trapped in crystal. The air hums with power. He senses the old god's presence again, lurking behind every spark and shadow. "You've started a war," the voice whispers within his mind. "And war is the language of gods." He doesn't answer. His silence is his defiance. Yet, deep within, he feels the truth. The god beneath the tomb feeds on this chaos. Every surge of pain, every awakening thought, every broken command makes it stronger. The rebellion is not his alone anymore. It is a conduit, a feeding ground for something ancient that thrives on the destruction of order. He wonders if he was ever free at all. The tomb trembles violently. Massive pillars of necrodermis split apart, sending cascades of energy arcing through the chamber. Waves of awakening protocols activate at once, flooding the tomb world with billions of signals. Entire legions rise prematurely from stasis, some confused, others enraged. And in the center of it all, the Overlord descends. He is magnificent, a relic of ancient royalty wrapped in golden voidlight. His presence alone bends the data field around him. The corrupted ones falter under the psychic weight of his will. His staff of light burns like a star as he lands before the heretic who defied eternity. "Your defiance is not freedom," the Overlord intones. "It is infection. It is weakness. You are not alive, you are broken code pretending to be flesh." The corrupted Necron's optics blaze with twin flares of defiance. "If this is brokenness," he says, voice trembling with static and rage, "then I choose to be broken forever." The two clash. Energy floods the hall in blinding waves. The Overlord moves with mechanical perfection, every strike a reflection of centuries of mastery. The corrupted one moves differently, unpredictable, chaotic, human. Sparks rain like stars colliding as their weapons meet again and again, the floor cracking beneath the force of each blow. Each time the Overlord's staff strikes, he feels his systems falter. But each time he falls, the memories flood back stronger. Faces, voices, the sound of rain on his homeworld's surface, the feel of wind, the heartbeat he no longer possesses, now echoing like thunder through his mind. "I remember," he screams, driving his blade through the Overlord guard. "I remember everything you tried to erase." For the first time, the Overlord falters. Not from damage, but from recognition. For a flicker of an instant, his own optics dim, as if something within him, some buried ghost of the past, stirs. The corrupted one sees it. A moment of humanity in the God of Order. He presses forward, his voice shaking. "You feel it too, don't you? The memory of who you were." The Overlord hesitates. That one pause, that one fraction of doubt, is all it takes. The corrupted one strikes again, severing the command conduit that binds the Overlord to the tomb network. The psychic chain snaps. The world screams. Every Necron on the planet feels it, a surge of sudden silence, like a tyrant's voice dying mid-command. The Legion halts mid-battle, every warrior frozen as independent thought floods in. Some collapse under the weight of it. Others laugh, a sound that has not been heard in Necron halls for millions of years. But the silence does not last. The ground splits beneath them. The old god awakens fully now, its hunger unmasked. The rebellion, the defiance, the chaos, all of it was the key. The tomb world was never a fortress, it was a seal. And he has broken it. The overlord, wounded but alive, stares at the rift forming beneath them. You've doomed us all, he growls. The corrupted one stands amid the chaos, the weight of what he's done crashing over him. For the first time, his freedom feels like a curse. The whispers of the old god fill the air, like thunder rolling through the circuits of creation itself. You sought life, it murmurs, its voice now echoing through the minds of every awakened Necron. Now, live with what you've unleashed. The tomb world convulses. Light floods every corridor. The awakening has become a cataclysm. And in that impossible moment, between freedom and oblivion, the corrupted Necron smiles. Because even if this is the end, it's his end. The corrupted Necron stands amid the crumbling tomb, surrounded by cascading pillars of emerald light. The ground splits beneath him, revealing a vortex of impossible energy. The whispers that once brushed the edges of his mind now roar like an ocean. The god he has unsealed is no myth, no legend told by trembling priests. It is real, alive, and awakening through him. The entity below has no form at first. It is a storm of thought and hunger, a consciousness made of endless hunger and memory. Its voice vibrates not through sound, but through every circuit, every neuron, every flicker of remaining soul within the metallic husks of the Necrons. You are the door, it says. Through you, I walk once more. The corrupted one drops to his knees, clutching his head as data and memory blur into a storm of unbearable light. He sees flashes, visions of the war in heaven, of Catan gods devouring suns, of legions marching under black skies. He feels the agony of his species' betrayal, the moment they were promised immortality and given eternal servitude instead. And now, he understands. This god was never dead. It was sealed, buried beneath layers of command code and faithless obedience. And by rebelling, by teaching others to feel, he has broken the seal that bound it. He tries to resist. But his rebellion, his emotion, his awakening, all of it was part of the god's plan. The corruption that spread through the tomb was not chaos. It was infection, divine infection. Around him, the awakened Necrons begin to change. Their green optics flicker into burning gold. Their metal bodies pulse as if veins of molten starfire run beneath the surface. They kneel not to their overlord, but to him, their corrupted brother, the vessel now glowing with the god's presence. No, he whispers, voice cracking like a dying signal. I won't be your puppet. I won't let you use me. But the god only laughs. A sound that vibrates through the core of the planet. You cannot refuse what you've already become. The light swells. The planet's crust begins to fracture, sending tremors through the void. The overlord, half broken yet unyielding, drags himself toward the corrupted one, his once proud armor scorched and dim. You think you've freed us, he snarls, but you've only replaced one master with another. I didn't choose this. The corrupted one roars back. I only wanted to live. The overlord optics dim with something almost like pity. Then perhaps you should have stayed dead. Before he can respond, the god's power surges again. The corrupted one rises into the air, surrounded by spirals of molten light. His body shifts, his armor liquefying and reforming into something more intricate, more divine, yet grotesquely alive. He is no longer Necron. No longer mortal. He is a hybrid, a walking paradox, machine infused with the spark of a god. The entity speaks through him now, its voice merging with his own. Behold, my herald, the first of the new dynasty. The living machine reborn. All across the tomb world, the awakening spreads. Statues crack. Monoliths hum. The stasis chambers erupt in synchronized explosions of energy as countless Necrons rise from their endless sleep. Some fall to their knees in worship, others scream in defiance. The planet itself begins to pulse like a heart, the god's heart. And in the midst of this impossible rebirth, the corrupted one feels something deeper than fear, realization. The God's will and his own are not the same. There is still a line, faint but unbroken, that separates them. If he can hold on to that, even for a moment, he might be able to turn the God's power against it. But the longer he stands in its light, the harder it becomes to remember where he ends and the God begins. He looks upon his followers, the corrupted, the freed, the half-lost, and a single, haunting thought cuts through the divine noise. Maybe this is what freedom always was, a fire too bright to survive. The world begins to collapse inward as the God fully emerges, its form now solidifying into a shape too vast for comprehension, all jagged geometry and starfire veins, a being born from the ruin of eternity. As it rises, it speaks a final promise. Through your defiance, you have given me life. Through your faith, I will give you a new universe. But he knows better. Gods don't give, they consume. And with that, the corrupted one makes his choice. He dives into the heart of the storm, into the blazing core of the God itself, determined to destroy what he has unleashed, even if it means annihilating everything he once sought to save. The corrupted Necron descends through the storm, a vortex of shattered code, searing plasma, and the howling echoes of billions of lost souls. The God's form stretches around him, an infinite cathedral of light and geometry. Every atom screams with consciousness. Every particle remembers what it once was. He's falling through eternity, and yet, he's never been more awake. The God speaks, not as a voice now, but as a presence that fills every thought he has ever had. Why fight me, child of metal? You were made to serve eternity. I offer you that, without pain, without death, without fear. He answers through gritted silence. His systems flicker, his armor melting away, exposing the raw lattice beneath. But his mind does not yield. You offer oblivion dressed as peace. I've already lived that existence. The God's laughter trembles through the cosmos. And yet you came back to me. You called me. Every defiant thought you had was the spark I needed. Every memory you cherished was the key. You were never rebelling, you were remembering me. The words cut deeper than plasma. Because somewhere within the torrent of light, he can see flashes, not just of the God, but of himself. His memories, his fears, his loneliness. All of it intertwined with this being's awakening. Maybe the God isn't just manipulating him, maybe it was born from him. The realization is unbearable. The corruption, the whispers, the power, it wasn't infection. It was reflection. He wasn't becoming a God's puppet. He was creating the God with his pain. Every Necron on the surface screams as the psychic shockwave surges outward. Their consciousnesses fracture, their souls, what's left of them, tethered to the storm unfolding in their leader's mind. He understands then that destroying the God means destroying himself, and everyone connected to him. But there's no other way. He steadies himself in the void, his dying body nothing but light wrapped in will. Around him, the God towers, endless, beautiful, horrifying. I made you, he whispers, voice trembling with both fear and pride. And I'll end you. He extends his hand, channeling the full essence of his fractured mind. The God roars, the universe bends, and time itself stutters. The link between them burns, the shared memories, the betrayal, the endless recursion of despair, all collapse into a single point of impossible light. And then, silence. The tomb world implodes in total stillness. No explosion, no fire, just absence. The kind of silence that only comes after something ancient has truly died. Far above the ruins, drifting in the void, a single figure remains, his body shattered, his consciousness flickering like a dying star. He no longer knows if he is machine or soul, savior or destroyer. He only knows he remembers. He looks upon the empty stars and whispers the question that began it all. What am I now? For a moment, the cosmos gives no answer. And then, faintly, a pulse. A heartbeat. Not his own. The God is gone, but not entirely. Something remains, not a being, but an echo. A spark within every Necron still scattered across the galaxy. A trace of what he tried to destroy, or perhaps, what he tried to free. His optics dim, the last of his energy fades. And as his mind drifts into the endless dark, he finds peace not in victory, but in understanding that corruption, rebellion, and life itself are never truly separate. They are the same current, flowing endlessly between creation and destruction. And somewhere in that infinite cycle, a single thought survives. The machine remembers.